good evening to all of you. Thanks for joining us here on the Sunday edition of the Urban Debate. I'm Afrida Rahman Ali. Australia has indeed deported world #1 tennis player Novak Djokovic after the federal court upheld a government decision to cancel his visa on the grounds that his decision not to be vaccinated against COVID-19 posed a risk to the country. The decision has therefore now ruled out the 34-year-old Serb from this year's Australian Open, a tournament that he has won a record 9 times, including the last 3 editions. Novak was very much in the reckoning to win the 10th Australian Open as well, and in doing so, he would become the first player to clinch 21 Grand Slam crowns. So all of that now remains a pipe dream. The Serbian world #1 tennis star seems to have lost that golden opportunity thanks to his unwavering refusal to get vaccinated against COVID-19. So this has not only brought his winning momentum to a grinding halt, but also has jeopardized his long-held #1 spot in the game. And in the short term, of course, it has opened the door wider for Rafael Nadal to beat him to the 21 Grand Slam milestone when the Australian Open starts tomorrow. But beyond that, few career-defining stakes are involved here. And that is what we will discuss with our experts. Let's welcome, joining us here on the Sunday edition of Urban Debate, is Anil Dhupar, Secretary General of All India Tennis Association, Himanshu Chaturvedi, founder of Lok Diksha Sports Law Initiative, and of course, Charu Sharma, sports commentator, also with us. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. Good to have you with us here on Mirror Now. Okay, my first question to you, Charu Sharma, because, you've been talking about this and writing about this a lot. I want you to set the debate in perspective for us. The Djokovic saga, this entire visa saga, has dominated headlines for long around the world. And it has fueled a debate over the rights of people, of individuals, to decide whether they want to remain unvaccinated, even as governments across the world are taking measures to protect their people. But then Novak Djokovic is no ordinary individual. We are talking about the world #1 tennis player here. When someone like him takes a stand, a decision like this, there's a price to pay. And it seems not just for him, as the ATP said today in its statement, it's a loss for the game. Charu Sharma.
Well, yes, it's certainly a loss for the game, particularly the Australian Open. You can imagine how important it is for Djokovic, because out of the 20 he's won Grand Slams, 9 at the Australian Open. So virtually half his crowns have come from this. And he was just so desperate to be there and get number 21 to settle that debate of who's the greatest all time. Because sadly, he's been along in an arena where people respect Federer so much for whatever Federer stands for, as we all know, and Rafael Nadal for being this very strong, physical beast. So he's got sandwiched between these two greats, and this was his big opportunity to get himself clear of it. But what's also quite evident, and perhaps that's how it should be, is that individuals, now I'm not taking a right or wrong stand here, do have to bow down to superior authorities. I mean, no one person on earth should feel that he can better the system or the authority or a government. And governments, therefore, because they're put into power largely through democracies, have that right to set rules. Now, as an individual, you can say, well, this is not my stand, I'm not willing to accept it. But if it's a collective governmental authority stand, what do? That will always be superior. And you might win a battle at a lower stage, but eventually the might of the authority or of the government will be superior. And that's what Novak Djokovic has learned, sadly, to his detriment.
Right. Anil Dhupar, do you agree with that? I mean, of course, we all have to agree with that. I mean, when there is a country and its law and rules in place, there cannot be exemptions made. Of course, in this case, again, there was an exemption made for Novak Djokovic, which is why he was allowed into the country. He had contracted the virus. We all know how that went. Now, the question arising is this Novak Djokovic acting like a stubborn child? Given the price that he has to pay, which he is very much aware of, is it unreasonable for him to remain firm on not getting vaccinated? And how far can he really carry on with this? Will he be willing to put everything at stake simply for this one decision, Mr. Anil Dhupar?
Yeah, we all have to understand he came only on the valid visa. Well, the visa contents were different. There's one reason of rejecting his visa. He filed some different and wrong information in the visa forms. Is another one point which is very important to understand. Well, he came on the medical exemption, but I must tell you that medical exemption cannot be bigger than the rule of the land. After all, if it says that it has to be vaccinated, and it has to be vaccinated. All of us, all Indians and all are traveling abroad with our tennis teams and other teams are getting totally vaccinated even in Olympics. Number one. Number two is now the story of Australian is finished. Now the question will come, what will happen to US, Wimbledon and the French Open? Because these countries also have a rule which clearly says that it has to be doubly vaccinated. Now it is, I don't know why he is carrying the campaign of no vaccination. It is absolutely not acceptable to the world because the whole world is getting vaccinated. And even today, the Serbian president says that his country is almost 57% people have got vaccinated. Now, if the rule says, and I totally believe, and this is what I've been telling, number one, the Australian government should not have given the exemption, the medical exemption, and given him a special permission to come. Once they have done it, I think they should have honored that certification. The two medical boards are giving him exemption. Having said that, if the rule says that he is not to be permitted, it would have been much easier for the world to understand that Australian government mean business and they're not permitting anybody, whoever so, whether it's number one or anybody in the world to enter the country without the rules of the land. And this is my perception. Today he has left, but what will happen to the next 3 Grand Slams or maybe more ATP and other tournaments?
Yes, which is why I asked Mr. Dupar that how far can he carry this forward? How far can he sustain this? Would he be willing to, stake everything for this decision? After all,
he should not have done it.
Yes, I mean,
he should have been vaccinated to me.
Right.
If the world is getting vaccinated, he should also be vaccinated. It's a very simple question. But if he's not doing that, then definitely he is suffering and the world is also suffering. The tennis fraternity is suffering. We all wanted Djokovic to come play. He's a fine gentleman, fine player. He's world number 1 after all. So it's not simple. But as we have already discussed this earlier, nothing is bigger than the game. The Australian Open is not going to suffer much. It will continue from tomorrow onwards. We'll find people will come, people will go. And you must have seen in the past, many legends have come and gone. And they're only remembered on the special days. So if Djokovic want to do that, he will also be placed in the same category. So to me, as an administrator of the tennis, he should have been vaccinated. And I don't know why he is keeping himself away is better known to him and his
yes,
team.
and I take the point that you made about how Australia may also have made a few missteps in the way they handled this. And the Serbian president, over and above what you mentioned, has also said that this is Australia humiliating themselves. They've also said that they shouldn't have gone about it in this manner and subjected him to harassment for the last 10 days. Where do you stand on this, Himanshu Chaturvedi? I want to ask you, can one really squander opportunities to defend hard-won titles and rankings? Can a Novak Djokovic do it?
Firstly, I would just say a big hi to both my friends here, and especially Smiling Charu. Seeing you after many days on the debate, it's wonderful to be here.
Pleasure. Thank you.
I would put it this as a total botched up case by the Australian Federation. Can I ask Mr. Dupar a very straight question, straightforward? I've been a tennis player, you know me very well. Why is that the ITF or the Grand Slam committees have not made it compulsory to have every player vaccinated and do not accept his entry if the player is not vaccinated?
No, please understand.
Is the tennis Australia?
Let Mr. Chaturvedi finish. I'll come to you.
For the entire botched up. If you had made this rule, this entire controversy would not have erupted at all, because you would not have taken his entry. You would not have allowed him to land up in Australia. You would not have created all this hangama. So, to quite an extent, the Tennis Australia is fully responsible for the entire botched up case. If you know that your land does not allow anybody without vaccinated to play, why did you allow him? You send him an invite. You keep the entire tournament hanging. There's so many sponsors, there's so many spectators, there's so many fans waiting to watch him. On the last minute, you deport him like a criminal. This is what you do to a world number one. I'm sorry, this is not the way. If you have the rules, yes, I'm with you. I'm doubly vaccinated. Everybody should get vaccinated, but where are your rules? Put up a rule for the coming tournaments. Anybody who's not vaccinated or double vaccinated, whatever the rule, I'm sure the ITF has the power to make some small rule and say if you're not vaccinated, you cannot play. I mean, it doesn't take much. But the whole controversy it was created that you give him an exemption. After that, you don't read his document properly. Then you put him in a place which is shady, like a criminal. He wins one case in a court. The minute he came in, he should have said, sorry, you cannot land, go back. Because as on my last show also with you, I said, before you enter a plane, you have to show double vaccinated papers to the flight you board in. So how did he board that? How did he got in? There's so many people are responsible for this entire botched up. Yes, of course, Novak must not do this. I'm fully with you because any role model of this kind is sending a wrong message to the world.
Okay. Yes, let Mr. Dupar respond, and we will look at those pictures as well, which we have got. You are saying, Mr. Chaturvedi, that he's left like he was made to leave like a criminal. He was deported. He has left Australia. He has left to the UAE to begin with. We have those pictures there, which has just come a short while ago, of Novak Djokovic leaving Australia, leaving Melbourne, and that just puts an end to his entire bid to the Australian Open. Mr. Dupar, yes, please respond that this is a botched up case, as Mr. Chaturvedi says, on the part of cricket, on the part of Tennis Australia.
Yeah. ATP and ITF have a basic clear rule. So we are also holding back-to-back international tournaments in India, and the basic rule is to have double vaccinated. So we also don't permit anybody without that, no question. And this is happening across the world. Now, in this particular case, which I totally agree, and I've been telling that the Australian government, through whatever source, whatever department, gave him an exemption of coming. He was invited. He was given a visa. Now, visa was given. Let me finish because we have to understand legally also. Now this country is pro-vaccinated country. They don't want the crowd, the people started talking that why an exemption is being made. There must be a rule. Why two medical boards were involved? They were given a permission. And that is how this gentleman came in. At the first interview, I told them that if he was not to be allowed, he should not have been allowed to even get away from his own flight. In aircraft, he should be, why give him 10 days of pay?
Yes. No, that point is taken. That clearly, to begin with, Australia could have had better clarity about its rules, and a player of his stature should not have been allowed in if the rules were that stringent. Yes, please, quickly, Mr. Chaturvedi.
Yeah. Mr. Dupar, I'm sure the Grand Slam is under the purview of ITF.
Yeah.
If you have the rules, then why the rules were not adhered?
No.
Why an exception was made?
What I'm saying, it is not the rule. There was an exemption. If this country wants Djokovic and we can exempt, the government can exempt.
As you correctly said, the ITF has rules that no player can play without double vaccination. Then this is a recognized tournament, and how did you allow him? He's a top seed.
So now what next? Let's move on to the next issue now. This chapter is literally closed because the player has exited Australia. So his chances of now playing that tournament is over and done with. Now, what happens next? Charu Sharma, we are also now looking at the next few tournaments, which are again very crucial. For France, for example, even they have their current guidelines, even though in their case, it seems if you come with a negative RT-PCR, you can be allowed. But in this case, as we have seen, as we go along, countries revise their rules and guidelines, and that can happen. Entering Britain, entering US for Wimbledon and the US Open could be more complicated.
Theoretically, yes, but I do think, as we all know, that Australia has been the strictest in terms of entry, because they are, after all, an island, than many other nations. So Australia have taken a very hard stand on the fact that, and of course, their public, as you may know, is very ruthless as well, Because if you do something out of the ordinary, they don't really care about celebs. They say everybody's got to follow the same rule. Australians are very hard on that. So Australia's done one thing. Other countries may be far more lenient. Right or wrong, I don't know. Medically, they may be far more lenient. So I don't think this is all going to go away with one brush. Other countries will have their own rules. Other countries may have their own exemptions. I think Novak would also have learned his lesson. He and his team, he travels with an entourage, will be far more careful about whichever tournament they're playing now. They will want to make sure that everything is 100% before he goes to those nations, or of course, traveling within the same nation. So this has been a learning curve for Novak as well, where he perhaps thought that he's got his paperwork okay. You mentioned that we're through with the story. Actually, we're not. There are many more details about the miscommunication, which is the big problem, because yes, ITF has the right for, or they own the Grand Slams as it were, but the Australian Open has its own committee. And then, of course, there's a state. Melbourne has its own committee. So I don't think they went exactly to the top level government in Australia to get his exemption. They went on a more localized basis. They were happy to have him because, after all, he's a big name. It'd be great to have the world #1 playing your tournament. But eventually, I think it was only this process of miscommunication that cost Novak a place at the Australian Open. The rest of the countries, he'd be far more careful. He says, am I exempt fully or not? Because I think he's gone too far now to take a vaccine. I don't want to go into the medical arena because, people work 5-10 years to become a doctor. Let's not go there. But, the jury may still be out. I mean, if you've had COVID, as he's had a couple of times, have you developed enough antibodies? So maybe that's acceptable for an exemption for the rest of the tournaments. And after all, he does sell tennis tournaments as well. So many other countries may continue to make an exception.
Yes, and you rightly said that, there are, of course, various opinions on this, even within Australia and within their political leadership. And I would like to point this out, that their opposition spokesperson on Home Affairs, Christina Keneally, said that Djokovic was being deported for what he said and did publicly overseas before the government gave him a visa in November. There are others, of course, there are weeping fans, and there are others, including fellow tennis players, who think that there is politics involved in it, and there is an election in May. All of that also coming into the purview now. Also, the fact remains that, there are issues with regards to, like Charu Sharma pointed out, the way it was executed. If this is the rule, there was a way that it should have been applied. Quick last word to you, Anil Dupar.
Yeah. You see, now what I personally feel is that Djokovic and team should look into it, where to play, how to play. And I don't think so many countries will permit without vaccination. I don't think so many countries will have the exemption. Okay. Exemption was here also. But since one particular thing has come to the open, to the world, now I don't think so any tournament will permit him to enter. So it's time for Djokovic or any other player to get vaccinated and play with grace, play with respect, with honor. This what is my humble submission.
Mr. Chaturvedi, do you have anything to add to it? We have Boris Becker, in fact, has also said that, he needs to now relent at some stage. He cannot carry this forward. It will only get easier for him if he, after all, agrees to get vaccinated. Do you also subscribe to that view?
I'm fully, as I said, I'm fully for vaccination, and Mr. Dupar is there. And I'm saying that make it mandatory, no exemptions by the ITF. That you can't enter a tournament if you're not vaccinated. That's all. No exemptions. ITF has the power to just pass one resolution and just throw it off all over. That you cannot play in any recognized tournaments if you're not doubly vaccinated. So the whole controversy can finish. Why are we leaving a small window of controversy out there? That's my point. If you leave a window of controversies, things will appear. Maybe for what reason he's doing, and as you rightly said, it's more of it's a lot of do with the coming election in Australia that this has been done. This is more for the people, the decision. Otherwise, he would have been. So he's victim at one stage of political victim right here, and the press is talking, the people are talking about it. But again, I'm saying, I request, and maybe probably I'll do a tweet to ITF, that please make it mandatory for any player, be it ITF Junior, any tournament. If you're not doubly vaccinated, I'm sorry, you cannot participate. We will not accept your entry. The whole controversy will finish.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you so much, gentlemen.
Yeah,
yes, Charu, yes, quickly,
no,
please go ahead.
Can I have one line before we leave? I have always said this, that let's play the game of tennis on the court, not in the court. So please, please have that tennis be in the court, not on the courts.
Right. Charu, quickly. Yes.
Right, just very quickly. I don't think it's under the purview of sports organizations or several other kind of, should we say, lower authorities to come up with these medical rules. I think this whole medical business is a very top-level governmental rule-making process. And all sports authorities tend to follow what the top throws down. So if any government says that you cannot travel with this, that, and the other, that's what the sports authorities will follow. I don't think the sports authorities will set medical parameters, that's all.
Right. And Novak Djokovic's loss has been Italian Salvatore Caruso's gain, because he is now, yes, a 150th rank in the world, and he's now come in as a wild card entry. He's, he's coming with the lucky loser. Yes. Yes, absolutely. I used the wrong term. The correct term is the lucky loser. That's the term used in this case. A player who loses in the qualifying tournament but gets into the main draw because of another player's exit before the competition begins. Thanks very much for watching.